feet above the Norwegian Sea. An Arctic midnight. It was frozen, it was lightless, and a 4-engine heavy transport aircraft was falling out of the sky in complete silence. In the jump seat, a 55-year-old loadmaster sat perfectly still. He stared at a scratched brass compass. He was the only man who knew how to save them, but he wondered if he had the right to speak. Elias Thorne lived in the margins. He moved through the massive fuselage of the Boeing 777 freighter. His movements were slow and deliberate. He had stopped trying to impress anyone decades ago. His gray hair was cut close. His canvas jacket was worn smooth at the elbows. He was the loadmaster. His job was gravity. He kept 70 tons of steel chained to the deck. If the cargo shifted, it would rip through the aluminum skin. They would all drop into the freezing ocean below. In the galley, Elias leaned against the bulkhead. He listened to the massive General Electric GE90 turbofans. They vibrated through the floorboards. It was a good vibration. He knew the song of this airplane. He felt the hum at Mach 0.84. He felt the cold seeping through the insulation. The cabin air felt heavy. It held the kinetic energy of 300,000 pounds of flying metal. Up front, Captain David Vance spoke. His voice drifted through the open cockpit door. "Elias, is that coffee still alive, or did it turn to motor oil?" "Depends on how desperate you are, Cap," Elias called back. His voice was rough. He poured 2 paper cups of dark brew. He walked forward. The cockpit was a sanctuary. Amber and green light pushed back the terrifying night sky. The temperature was perfectly managed, but the psychological chill of the void pressed against the thick glass. Captain Vance was 42. He had a sharp jaw and easy confidence. 10,000 hours of safe flying bought that confidence. He took the cup. He never looked away from the primary flight display. First Officer Sarah Miller sat beside him. She was younger and tightly wound. Her eyes darted across the instruments. It was a practiced, relentless scan. She offered a tight smile. "Thanks, Elias. Got those forward straps tight? We might hit some chop." "Tight as a drum, Sarah," Elias said softly. "Nothing is moving back there." "Let's keep the shiny side up," Vance chuckled. He took a sip and winced at the heat. "Head back, old man. Get some sleep. We won't need you until Reykjavik." It was warm condescension. He was the supporting cast. Part of the furniture, reliable, safe. Elias nodded. His hand brushed his left pocket. The cold brass compass sat there. It was a blind habit. He didn't mind the invisibility. He had curated it for 20 years. "I'll be in the back," Elias said. He stepped out. He pulled the heavy door shut. It sealed the pilots in their world of glass. Elias walked into the dim cargo hold. The utilitarian lights cast long shadows. He sat in his jump seat. He pulled the heavy straps over his shoulders. He took out the compass. He didn't open it. He ran his thumb over a deep groove on the back. His heart beat steadily, but deep in his chest an old ghost stirred. The hum of the deck felt wrong, not to the ears, to the bones. Some memories stay locked away. Elias kept his in a gray box. It smelled of aviation fuel and burning wire. 20 years ago he didn't load cargo, he flew ghosts. He was the lead test pilot for Vanguard. It was a classified military program. They flew manned drones into Category 5 microbursts. They didn't fight enemies. They fought the weather. They learned how air sheared metal. They learned how supercooled water killed turbines in seconds. They survived environments that tore airliners into confetti. The memories hit him physically. The smell of burning insulation. The violent shaking of a cockpit breaking apart. The blinding sweat. And Colonel James Arrington's voice in his headset. Arrington was made of iron. He taught Elias to read the sky. It wasn't empty space. It was a fluid ocean of violence. Elias remembered the Mojave Desert Simulator. The windowless room was stifling. Synthetic alarms blared. His virtual aircraft tumbled. He pulled back on the yoke. His forearms burned. He fought the nose-down dive. He tried to force the plane up against an invisible, crushing downdraft. "You're fighting the wrong war, Eli," Arrington shouted. He slapped the metal console. "I'm losing altitude," Elias yelled. Sweat soaked his flight suit. "I need pitch, nose up." "If you pitch up, you stall and die." Arrington leaned in. His breath smelled of peppermint. His eyes burned. "Stop fighting the angle. Let the air take the nose. Focus on the speed. You ride the wave until it breaks." Arrington grabbed Elias by the shoulder. "There is pitch, and there is pace. In this environment you never use pitch. Use pace. Forget the pitch, watch the pace. It defied every pilot instinct. You don't aim at the ground when you are falling, you don't surrender the climb. Elias remembered unstrapping from that simulator. His hands shook violently. He stared at the telemetry screens. Green lines plotted a dozen simulated deaths. He looked at his mentor. "When will I ever need this?" Elias asked. His voice was hollow. "When will I fly a dead plane through a frozen hurricane?" Arrington looked suddenly old. "You won't. If you see a sky like this, you're already dead. We just want to be dead a few seconds later than everyone else." Arrington died 3 months later. He was torn apart over the Pacific. The storm was supposed to be manageable. The ocean swallowed the aircraft. Elias was on the ground. He watched the telemetry fail. He watched his friend become digital fragments on a screen. Elias quit the next morning. He traded the violent sky for heavy cargo. He chose chains and straps. He made the sky a highway, not an enemy. Elias blinked. The memory faded. He stared at the curved aluminum wall. The deck vibrated. A subtle shift. The GE-90 engines sounded the same, but the frequency changed. It felt like walking on a frozen lake. The ice was cracking beneath his boot. In the cockpit, Vance talked about his daughter. The amber light softened his face. "I swore I'd make it this time," Vance said. He adjusted a navigation screen. "She's playing Mozart, or Beethoven. Honestly, Sarah, it sounds like cats on the keys. But she's trying." Miller smiled. She charted fuel burn on her tablet. "My dad missed every game I played. He was always on a layover. You being there matters, David." Outside, the Norwegian Sea was hidden. A dense layer of stratus clouds blanketed the water. The sky looked like bruised iron. The aircraft cruised beautifully. The autopilot handled the micro-adjustments. The outside air was negative 50 degrees Celsius. It was a boring polar transit, the kind pilots sleep through with open eyes. Back in the cabin, 2 technicians rested on cots. They wore heavy parkas. One was a young kid with grease under his nails. A dog-eared paperback rested on his chest. He breathed softly. He was oblivious to the void outside. Elias stood up. His joints ached. He walked to a tiny acrylic window. He didn't look at the clouds. He looked at the edges of the glass. A fractal pattern of ice was forming. It wasn't harmless frost. It was clear, thick rime ice. It crept inward from the rubber seal. It moved fast. Elias felt his stomach drop. He touched the bulkhead. It was painfully cold. The heaters were blasting warm air, but the aluminum bled heat too fast. It defied physics. Up front, a secondary engine display flickered. A single digit on the EGT gauge flashed from green to white, just for a fraction of a second. It was a minor glitch. The data stream righted itself. Miller never noticed. Vance was talking about buying a video camera. Elias watched the thick ice swallow the window. The black glass became an opaque white wall. Not everything that looks fine is fine. The crisis did not arrive with a bang. It came like a thief. It started with a sound, a deep, resonant thrum. It didn't come from the engines. It came from the airframe. It sounded like a steel drum dragged across concrete. Elias stopped in the aisle. He closed his eyes. He tuned out the heaters. He isolated that frequency. Aero-elastic flutter. The air over the wings was separating. They were flying into supercooled moisture. It was a rogue weather cell. It didn't show on radar. It was invisible, suspended water. It was waiting for a trigger to freeze. The massive Boeing 777 was the trigger. In the cockpit, the master caution light flashed yellow. A sharp chime echoed. Miller leaned forward. She frowned. Her hand moved to the center console. "I'm getting an anti-ice disagree message on the right wing." "Cycle the heaters," Vance said calmly. It was an automatic reflex. Probably a frozen sensor. "Cycling." Miller flipped the switches. Relays clicked. She watched the screen. "Still getting the disagree. Wait. Left wing shows it too. David, bleed air pressure is dropping." Before Vance could answer, the GE-90 turbofans changed pitch. It wasn't a spool down, it was a mechanical suffocation. Bang. A massive compressor stall rocked the aircraft. It felt like hitting a brick wall in midair. The young technician jolted awake. His book slid to the floor. His eyes went wide. "Engine number 2 rollback," Miller shouted. Her calm shattered. "We're losing N1. "I have control," Vance said. He gripped the yoke. The autopilot disconnected. A harsh wailing alarm flooded the cockpit. Run the engine failure checklist. The checklist was useless. 5 seconds later, supercooled water flooded the left engine. It bypassed the failing heaters. It froze solid on the titanium blades. The left engine rolled back. Total thrust loss. The cockpit exploded with red warnings. The primary displays flickered. The pitot tubes froze completely. Airspeed dropped to 0. Then it spiked to a false overspeed warning. "We've lost both," Miller's voice cracked. Raw panic bled through her training. "Dual engine failure. Airspeed data is unreliable." The heavy jet sank. 300,000 pounds of metal wanted the earth. The nose pitched down naturally. "Pitch up," Vance ordered himself. He pulled heavily on the control column. "Give me max continuous thrust. Try for an auto relight." "Ignition is on, no light off." Miller flipped switches frantically. "Captain, we are sinking at 3,000 feet a minute. We're losing hydraulic pressure." In the back, the floor dropped away. Gravity vanished for a terrifying second. Elias grabbed a heavy cargo strap. The technicians shouted. The wind roared past the unpowered hull. Elias looked at the cockpit door. He knew exactly what Vance was doing. Vance was trying to maintain altitude. He was pulling the nose up. He traded airspeed for height. He fought the crushing weight of the ice. It was textbook instinct. And in this atmospheric trap, it was a death sentence. Elias closed his eyes. The smell of burning wire returned. He heard Arrington's voice. "Ride the wave until it breaks." He could stay quiet. He had no authority. He would expose his past. If he was wrong, he was just a crazy old man. He would hasten their deaths. The deck vibrated violently. The stick shaker activated in the cockpit. The mechanical rattle vibrated through the bulkheads into Elias's boots. Elias dropped the cargo strap. He unlatched the heavy door. He stepped inside. The cockpit was total chaos. The ground proximity warning system barked rhythmically. A cold, mechanical voice demanded the impossible. "Terrain, terrain, pull up." "Get out of here, Elias," Vance shouted. Veins bulged on his neck. He fought the heavy yoke. The fly-by-wire system was degrading. Flight computers dropped offline. "We have an emergency." "Captain, push the nose down," Elias said. His voice was low. It cut through the blaring alarms. It carried chilling certainty. Miller snapped her head around. She stared like he was a ghost. "Are you insane? We're dropping like a stone. Strap in. You're in a supercooled downdraft." Elias stepped closer. The aircraft shuddered violently. It protested the extreme angle. "Your wings are loaded with rime ice. If you keep pulling back, you will stall this airframe. It happens in 20 seconds. Push the nose down." "I am trying to keep us out of the ocean," Vance yelled. His arms shook. The altimeter unwound dizzily, passing 20,000 feet. Pushing down meant aiming at death. It violated every instinct he had ever honed. Elias didn't argue. He leaned over Miller's shoulder. He ignored the primary displays. He looked at the center panel. "Your primary airspeed is lying. The pitot tubes are frozen," Elias said flatly. "Your angle of attack is critical. Watch your EGT and N1 gauges. They will spike and flutter in 3 seconds. The ice is starving the bypass ducts. 3, 2, 1. The gauges fluttered wildly. They spiked into the red. They collapsed back, exactly as he predicted. Vance froze. He looked back at Elias. Terror warred with staggering confusion. "How did you know that?" "Captain Vance," Elias said. He locked eyes with the pilot. The alarms blared, but the cockpit felt silent. "I ran the Vanguard atmospheric trials. I have 1,000 hours flying heavy frames into localized shear fronts. If you pitch up, we die. Let go of the pitch. Focus on the pace." The word hung in the air. Pace, not speed, not velocity. It was a pilot's word. It meant feeling the aircraft's energy. Miller looked at Vance. Her hands trembled over dead throttles. "David, the stick shaker is worse. The wings are giving up." Vance looked at the altimeter. 15,000. The ocean rushed up in the dark. He looked at Elias. Elias didn't blink. He gripped the brass compass. His knuckles were white. He stood rooted to the floor. "What do I do?" Vance asked. The cost of the question was immense. He surrendered his ship to the cargo loader. "Give me the center console," Elias said. He wedged himself between the seats. He didn't sit. He braced himself. He looked out the front windscreen. Absolute terrifying blackness. "Push the yoke forward, Captain," Elias said gently. Give the wind what it wants. Vance swallowed hard. He pushed the heavy control column forward. The nose of the massive 777 dipped. The descent rate doubled instantly. Outside, a loud mechanical thud echoed. The ram air turbine deployed into the slipstream. The rat howled like a banshee. It spun up to provide emergency power. The warning system screamed faster. Sink rate. Pull up. Pull up. We're doing 6,000 feet a minute down, Miller shouted. Her hands hovered helplessly over useless plastic throttles. Let it fall, Elias commanded. He stared at the integrated standby flight display. The digital speed tape trembled. It slowly crept upward. Gravity did the work the engines couldn't. We need pace. We need forward energy. It shears the ice off the wings. Read me the standby altitude, Sarah. Miller hesitated. Her brain fought the new chain of command. Passing 12,000, 11,500. Vance, keep the wings perfectly level. Do not fight the turbulence. Let the airframe ride it. If it drops, you drop with it. Don't fight the pitch. The physical dive was agonizing. Gravity shifted. It lifted them against their harnesses. Blood rushed to their heads. The wind tore across the fuselage. It was a deafening, metallic scream. The aluminum skin felt ready to peel away. 10,000, Miller read. Her voice cracked. Elias, there's a mountain range off Iceland, if we're off course. Ear over the water, Elias said. He couldn't see a thing. He felt the geography in his bones. 8,000, 8,000, Miller confirmed. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. Captain, when we hit 5,000 feet, the temperature rises. The air thickens. We will trade this momentum for a single pullout. One sweeping parabola. We only get one shot. Pull too hard, the wings snap. Don't pull hard enough, we hit the water. Understood. Vance gritted his teeth. Sweat poured down his face. It dripped onto his shirt. 7,000. Elias closed his eyes for a second. The plastic console felt cold. He smelled peppermint. Ride the wave until it breaks. 6,000. Suddenly a wall of crosswind slammed them. The right wing dipped violently. It threatened to roll the jet onto its back. A secondary shear line. No simulator ever programmed this during a zero-thrust dive. I'm losing the roll, Vance shouted. He hauled the yoke left. The flight computers were in direct mode. The wings were deformed by ice. The response was incredibly sluggish. The plane flew like it was in wet cement. Elias ignored the instruments. He looked at Vance's tense arms. Dead aerodynamics fought desperate muscle. Step on the rudder, David, Elias barked. Use your feet. Airflow over the ailerons is separated. Skid the nose left. Let the dihedral roll it. Vance slammed his boot onto the left pedal. The aircraft groaned. Metal stressed terrifyingly, but the nose slewed sideways. The right wing caught the lift. The plane leveled violently. It slammed them sideways in their seats. 5,000 feet, Miller screamed. Pull, Elias said. Smooth, slow, 2 degrees a second, no faster. Vance pulled the yoke back. The physical strain was immense. He fought the falling machine with pure muscle. 4,000, descent rate slowing. Keep pulling, Elias murmured. He watched the digital speed tape. The numbers held. The pace held. 3,000. The wind changed pitch. The high scream deepened into a concussive roar. Crack. A gunshot noise echoed in the cockpit. Chunks of thick ice tore off the windshield. Ice ripped from the wing edges. It impacted the fuselage like shrapnel. 2,000, Elias, we're going to hit. Hold the pull, David, hold it. The digital altimeter blurred. 1,000 feet. 500. The absolute blackness outside suddenly split. 2 distinct textures appeared. Black sky and churning white-capped ocean. The Norwegian Sea rushed up with horrifying speed. Now, Elias said softly, pitch up. Vance hauled the yoke back with everything he had left. The 777 groaned. Floorboards shrieked. G-force slammed them down brutally. Elias's knees buckled. He clung to the console. His knuckles turned white. His breath locked in his chest. The altimeter stopped at 200 feet. The massive aircraft leveled out. It skimmed dangerously low. Ocean spray lashed the underbelly. Airspeed is bleeding off, Miller whispered hollowly. Try the ignition, Elias said. He stared at the EGT gauges. The ice is shedding. We have airspeed. Windmill the cores. Miller slammed the engine start selectors to start. 3 agonizing seconds passed. Only the roaring ocean and the howling rat made a sound. Then a deep cough shook the right wing. The EGT gauge spiked rapidly. The N1 caught and spun up. Engine 2 roared to life. It rattled their teeth. A second later, Engine 1 caught fire. It whined up to a glorious howl of thrust. "We have power," Vance choked out. His chest heaved. He eased the throttles forward. "We have engines." The aircraft began a slow, beautiful climb away from the dark water. Elias let go of the console. He stepped back. Nobody spoke. For 1 full minute, only the turbofans made a sound. 3 people breathed raggedly. They had just walked back from the edge of the world. The tension drained from Elias. His legs turned to water. He leaned heavily against the door. His hands shook violently. He shoved them deep into his pockets. His fingers brushed the brass compass. For the first time in 20 years, the metal felt warm. Miller spoke first. She didn't look back. She stared at the faint gray dawn. It illuminated the jagged clouds they had just survived. "Reykjavik approach is calling us," she whispered. Her professionalism was gone. She sounded like a tired child. "They want our status." Vance took a shuddering breath. He wiped a streak of sweat and grime off his cheek. He turned slowly and looked at Elias. It wasn't gratitude. Gratitude was too small. It was the look of a man seeing a ghost. He realized the ghost was the only reason he was still breathing, the only reason he would ever see his daughter play piano again. He didn't offer a dramatic speech. He offered a single profound nod. "Tell them," Vance said to Miller. His eyes never left Elias. "Tell them Flight 809 is stable. Have a heavy maintenance crew ready. We stress the airframe." Elias turned. He walked out of the cockpit without a word. He moved into the cargo hold. The 2 technicians sat on the edge of their cots. They gripped the rails. They stared blankly at the walls. They had no idea how close they came to the water. The young kid reached down with trembling fingers. He picked up his paperback. He swallowed hard. "Hey, man," the kid said shakily. "Did we hit some turbulence?" Elias looked at the kid. He looked at the massive chains. 70 tons of steel sat perfectly in place. "Yeah," Elias said softly. "Just some chop. Nothing the straps couldn't hold." The aircraft touched down in Iceland. A small army of flashing emergency vehicles surrounded them. The professionalism of the ground crews felt alien. Fire trucks, mechanics, and investigators swarmed the plane. They reduced a profound human survival to data points and maintenance logs. Elias skipped the debriefing. Vance and Miller sat with safety inspectors in the terminal. Elias walked out the side door of the hangar. He stood alone on the freezing tarmac. The bitter wind whipped his jacket. He pulled out the brass compass. He finally flipped the heavy lid open. Taped to the glass dial was a small, faded photograph. Colonel James Arrington. Elias didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just stood there. He let the wind hit his face. He felt the solid concrete beneath his boots. He let the ghost finally rest. 3 months later, Elias Thorne did not return to loading cargo. He did not return to the military. He retired to a small coastal town in Oregon. The sky met the Pacific Ocean in a brooding gray haze. The aviation world buzzed about Flight 809. Official reports cited extraordinary airmanship. Vance and Miller made sure Elias's name made the hearings. But Elias refused to testify. He refused the commendations. He refused to face men who thought the sky was just a math equation. He always avoided the spotlight. He wouldn't step into it now. He stood on the beach at low tide. The wind tore off the water. It smelled of salt and ancient storms. He came here for a reason. It was the last place Arrington visited before his final flight. Elias watched the heavy gray waves crash. They turned immense oceanic power into harmless white foam. "I didn't pitch up, James," Elias said quietly to the wind. "I watched the pace." He asked himself the same question 1,000 times. If he never entered that simulator, would he have known what to do? Did Arrington have to die to pay for those 5 lives on the 777? He heard footsteps in the wet sand. A woman in her late 60s approached. She wore a heavy wool coat. Sarah Arrington, James's widow. She stood next to him. She looked out at the turbulent water. They had spoken twice in 20 years. "I heard what you did, Elias," she said steadily. "David Vance called me. He did a lot of digging. He wanted me to know." Elias looked at his hands. "I just told him how to fly the plane, Sarah. James taught me." "You carried it a long time," she said gently. "The weight of that lesson." "Why did it cost so much?" Elias whispered. He voiced the question that haunted him. Why did he have to die to figure out the telemetry? It doesn't seem fair. Sarah looked at him. Her eyes were the color of the churning sea. You're looking at it like a pilot, Elias, she said softly. She reached out. She briefly, warmly touched his arm. The sky doesn't owe us an explanation, but sometimes, if we are very lucky, it lets us use what it leaves behind. She turned. She walked back up the beach. She left him alone with the crashing waves. Elias watched the horizon. Dark clouds gathered, heavy with rain and beautiful energy, and for the first time in 20 years he didn't feel the need to look away.